Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer. After weeks of power games, pushing and pulling back and forth, we think, if we believe the declaration of Donald Trump, and that's always a big if, he said early Monday, the United States and Iran have reached an agreement to end the war between them. And Trump declared he has ended the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and said on Truth Social, let the oil flow. Here with me to review the pretty dizzying events of the past 48 hours in the Middle East and look ahead to what's to come is Haaretz columnist Joshua Leifer. Josh, thanks for joining me.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I don't know about you, but for me, it's been quite a ride, even for Israelis who are used to this kind of thing, up and down, back and forth. As of the weekend, Trump was promising to end the war any minute now, but he's been promising that for months. He publicly forbade Benjamin Netanyahu to strike Beirut. That was what led Iran to launch missiles at Israel last week. He dared to attack the Hezbollah stronghold, Dahiya neighborhood of Beirut. But after northern Israel was hit by very deadly Hezbollah drones. Luckily, no one was injured, but it was a very gross violation of any pseudo ceasefire that was supposed to be in place. Netanyahu did exactly what Trump told him not to. He hit Beirut, a move that Trump said showed, quote, no fucking judgment. And Iran was reportedly going to retaliate with another round of missiles literally last evening. We were all braced for them. And instead, we got a Trump declaration that, bingo, there's going to be an agreement. At first, he had promised it would be signed yesterday, but instead we were told it's going to be signed on Friday. Now we're, just watching and waiting and seeing what's going to happen in the meantime. It's always a very dangerous time between when they say there's going to be an agreement and there's going to be an actual agreement. So, Josh, how's your blood pressure? I presume you didn't have any tickets to the big two concerts that were canceled last night when thousands of people were ready to go to them?
No concert tickets. I have a 4-month-old baby, so it's a different kind of high blood pressure when you get the alert about incoming rocket fire.
How have you been gauging the reaction, since that announcement came out? We've basically only had one day to collect the national reactions, but from what I've seen, Netanyahu is being attacked from the right and from the left on what his big war in Iran has come to.
Yeah, I think that in a way that he certainly didn't expect, the big gamble that he made strategically post-October 7th hasn't happened. And what I mean by that is basically he suffered the greatest, Israel's greatest security and strategic failure on October 7th. And it seems like Netanyahu said to himself, okay, how do I save my legacy personally? And also consider, to the extent that he considers what he thinks is best for the country, how does he pull Israel out of the situation it was in on October 7th? And the answer to those questions that he came up with was he's going to reconfigure the map of the Middle East and disassemble Iran's proxy network of Hezbollah and Hamas, and also take on the Iranian regime itself. And, compared to, which is hard to believe, like just last year when the first Iran war happened. It's
almost exactly a year.
Literally almost to the day, I think today. Yeah. Netanyahu, I think, thought that he was riding high. He enlisted the U.S. in the end of that round of fighting to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. And I think he thought that he was on the way to seeing his legacy be rehabilitated by those wars. And, fast forward 1 year to where we are now, and that's not the case. And I think he's having to confront that, and hopefully the opposition will be able to capitalize on this. With Israel's opposition, I'm always a little bit wary of putting too much stock in their abilities, but in theory, this should be kind of a slam dunk that, we're almost 3 years into the post-October 7th wars, And it's true that in a certain sense, Israel has scored some important military victories in the like most basic sense that Hamas doesn't really pose a military threat to Israel. Hezbollah seems to have been somewhat degraded, although less so than it seemed at the end of the fighting in 2024. Iran, to some extent, has been dealt some setbacks, but not so much, it seems. But strategically, Israel's in a terrible place where the Iranian regime is stronger than it was, at least as a regional player. It's able to kind of to enforce a new kind of equation where Israeli freedom of movement is limited by the potential threat of ballistic missiles from Iran, which wasn't the case prior to October 7th. And so, all of this is to say, there should be an opening for Israel's opposition to hit him. But part of the problem, this is the last thing I'll say on this, is that part of the problem is that Israel's opposition doesn't really know what to make of this failure. And so you have some figures who are saying, to paraphrase a common Israeli idiom, what didn't work with force will work with more force. That's kind of been like the baseline opinion. I think there is an opening for someone to say, well, no one, and actually Eisenkot said this in the Uvda profile that came out a couple of weeks ago.
Gadi Eisenkot, our current front-running opposition figure for the moment.
Yes, yeah. I will say that I was identifier that he had the potential to outflank Bennett and Lapid in a piece I wrote a couple of weeks ago. And then, he says an interesting line in the Uvda documentary where he says, like, no one really could have expected that an air war would bring down the regime, something that's never happened before. So in theory, there's like the raw materials for a more substantive critique of Netanyahu's strategy. But so far, I think we're not hearing it, really.
So just to zero in on Iran, because that is the breaking news right now, overall, what we were talking about, Hamas is still standing and Hezbollah is still standing. And like you said, strategically, they're weakened, presumably. But the problem is that Netanyahu overpromised. He said, we're going to, completely eliminate Hamas, and almost said we're going to eliminate Hezbollah and eliminate the Iranian regime. So, he kind of did it to himself, right, with his big promises.
He totally backed himself into a corner, which is, I think, at least recently had been uncharacteristic of Netanyahu. Usually he's a savvy operator. Usually he's pretty careful. Here he totally overpromised.
Netanyahu 2.0, yeah.
Yeah, Netanyahu 2.0 was not so careful. He said, we're going to get total victory. We're going to get rid of Hamas. We're going to get rid of Hezbollah, and we're going to bring down the Iranian regime. Neither of those things have happened. Now, the reason why I was kind of hedging before is that I think that it wouldn't be correct to say that the same, like Hamas is the same now as it was before. It wouldn't be correct to say that Hezbollah is the same as it was before. And acknowledging those differences, I think, is necessary if we're going to make like a balanced critique. But on the other hand, it's totally true that he didn't do what he promised to do. No one who I think understands, and I'm not an expert in military strategy, but no one really thought that he could do what he promised to do, but he did anyway. But more generally, I think that one thing that maybe characterizes this more reckless Netanyahu 2.0 is that there is no strategy in the sense that there is a goal or there is a vision, and that's kind of Israel, unrivaled Israeli military dominance. But how to practically get there, whether through some combination of diplomatic or military measures, there is no strategy.
Well, especially on the diplomatic front, there's zero strategy in the diplomatic front.
Right. I mean, I don't think that Netanyahu does not believe in diplomacy and has seemed to think that military force can accomplish better what diplomacy might otherwise do. And that's been proven wrong.
Funny, considering that Netanyahu began his career and his rise as the Israeli representative to the United Nations, right? He was supposed to be a master diplomat, and now 2.0 does not believe in diplomacy at all, it seems.
What good is that unaccented English if you're not going to use it?
Exactly. I do want to zero in on Iran, the story of the moment. So if we believe Iran, which, even more a little bit far-fetched than believing Trump, though some would argue, one against the other, through its official news channels, the agreement includes an immediate and permanent cessation of hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon, release of $24 billion of frozen Iranian assets. Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days, according to the arrangements that Iran determines, a plan for the reconstruction of Iran worth approximately $300 billion. The United States commits to withdrawing its forces from areas surrounding Iran and will not interfere in its internal affairs. Suspension of all sanctions on Iranian oil sales, and Iran renewing its commitment, pinky swear, not to produce nuclear weapons, with a 60-day negotiation process focused on the nuclear issue and the handling of the enriched nuclear material. Israel was shut out of this agreement. Whether or not these are actually the details, this is obviously the Iranians' version of the details. Trump, for his part, said that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was supportive of the memorandum of understanding ahead of the agreement. He's okay with it, Trump said. Why isn't it good for Bibi? Iran can't have a nuclear weapon under any circumstances. So why isn't this good for Bibi? Let us count the ways. And also, why might it not be good for Trump?
I mean, I think we can start with Trump. I think it's not good for Trump in the sense that anyone who thinks thoughts can see that if these are indeed the details of the deal, then Iran got everything that it wanted, and then Trump basically had to give things to Iran in order to end the war.
Is there any way he can spin it as being a better deal than the JCPOA, Obama's deal with the Iranians, which he so scorned and then withdrew from?
The only way he would be able to spin that is if there is some kind of very unexpected way of dealing with the nuclear issue. Then I think maybe there'd be some kind of spin, but I really don't think that is going to happen. We should also say that we don't know if this ceasefire will hold. I mean, one of the things that is...
Well, if it will exist, and then will it hold?
Right, if it will exist and if it will hold. I think that if we're looking at comparisons, although obviously the context is very different, Trump enforced a ceasefire on Israel and Hamas in Gaza. It rolled out a kind of grandiose board of peace plan, and then nothing really happened. And we're still, the situation there is kind of stagnated in this weird neither peace nor war situation. So I don't think that kind of a scenario of that kind, I don't think is out of the question at all in Iran or with Iran and Israel, where America kind of says, okay, we're out. You guys figure this out, have a kind of cold peace, or not cold peace, a kind of periodic state of aggression. And where he has to, he lost interest and wants to focus on other things, like the cage fight on the lawn of the White House. We'll know what he can spin when we know what level of follow through is going to happen on this deal.
If it happens sort of almost, let's say 70% of the way it's looking, according to the Iranians, is there any way that Bibi can narrative his way out of this corner of looking like a total 3-time loser? Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, over promising to crush them all?
Not that I can see. It may be the case that his advisors see something that I don't. In the past, and there are people who are saying that the way Netanyahu is going to get out of this is he's going to do something really rash and violent, and kind of now Netanyahu has to do something to show that Trump doesn't own him, and has to be the kind of the spoiler.
Well, arguably, when he attacked Beirut on Sunday, it looked like it was sort of a nod to all of the commentary going on in Israel of, look, Netanyahu is Trump's lapdog, and he is prioritizing obeying Trump over the safety of the citizens of the North. He went in and he attacked Beirut right after Trump told him not to attack Beirut. So potentially he could do it again.
Right. I think that I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all that we could easily see another example of a Hezbollah drone hitting a house in northern Israel. If there's a casualty, Israel will respond. It will hit Beirut. That will force Iran to respond. And maybe Trump will be able to talk the sides down. Maybe he won't. I think that definitely could happen without it leading to a kind of full-on restarting of a full-on war. That in some sense becomes a new normal. I also think that for Netanyahu, that might be as we're saying, that might be the better scenario, for Netanyahu. We know Netanyahu likes to keep fronts open. That's true in Gaza. It's true in Lebanon. It's true in Syria. Maybe it's true in Iran, where, given the choice between appearing like a total vassal state of the United States, where he has to accept everything that all of Trump's dictates, or keeping the Iranian front open, even if that means once every couple of weeks Israelis have to pack their bag and go down to the shelter and wait for the siren for a ballistic missile. I think Netanyahu would choose the latter.
But he may be facing a very stark choice between really pissing Trump off and not getting American support for whatever consequences happens, really endangering the security of the state, and going for it. You don't know which way you think he would lead, defying Trump or sort of not wanting to risk his domestic political fortunes. And also, what will Trump do? If it's a real, violation by Hezbollah, if they really attack Israel, maybe he would back Netanyahu up.
Right. It's all gray areas. If people die, Trump says, okay, they have to respond, blah, blah, blah. Like there's lots of gray areas where we could see different kinds of scenarios happening. I mean, part of what makes the Iran issue somewhat different from the other fronts is that when it comes to Iran and fighting Iran, I mean, Israel is always reliant on America, but it's even more reliant on America. Even to shoot down these missiles, it requires American. I mean, there are American troops in Israel. There's Patriot battery in Israel. Like, I think it seems like Netanyahu understands that there's he can defy Trump up to a certain point at which it does jeopardize Israel's ability to defend its own people. On the other hand, does Netanyahu care in that way? Like, in his calculus, appearing strong and showing that he's not a lapdog of Trump is worth, the potential withdrawal of American support in some way or another.
And then it's really Israel against the world, because the world pressures this war. It was the kind of animosity shown by everyone who was blaming Netanyahu for getting Trump into the war. On the U.S. domestic front, we've talked about this on the podcast. Not only the Democrats, but the Republicans are getting fed up with it. So it could be, as Trump said in his eloquent way, Israel alone against the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as long as Netanyahu is prime minister, the combination of that growing sense of isolation and pressure won't lead Israel into anywhere good. But I do think that if and when Netanyahu leaves, the geopolitical situation does create an opening for an Israeli leader to say, we tried the method of only using force. It didn't work. And so we have to look for other ways to do things. It takes time. If we think about I always go back to this in 1973.
Putting on your historian hat.
Putting on the historian hat in 1973, you have the Yom Kippur War, and then by 1978, Israel is signing a peace treaty with Egypt. And that happened because Israel came up against the limits of what force could do in that war. It won that war basically, but it was close. And it wouldn't have won it without emergency American help. And so these events take time to metabolize. I don't think that there's going to be some grand peace situation deal tomorrow, but I do think that with a different Israeli leadership that is somewhat more strategically minded, there will be at least an opening to recalculate and recognize that the use of force has run up against the limit. Like, I think that Netanyahu, I mean, if you read what he's written over the past of his life, he really genuinely believed that the stronger Israel is, the more options it has on the table. And he thought that if he transforms Israel into a unrivaled military regional hegemon, then Israel would have fair game. But that's not turned out to really be the case. And in some ways, it took this Iran debacle for Netanyahu's Israel to be humbled a little bit.
Well, on that glimmer of hope, even a slight glimpse of optimism, I think it's a good note on which to end our conversation. On the breaking news, Joshua Leifer, wonderful columnist for Haaretz. Everyone should check out what he's writing, and the author of a book, Tablet Shattered. So keep following what's going up, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot more not just about these war and peace situations, but about our upcoming elections.
Yes, I'm sure. Thanks so much for having me. It was great talking with you.
And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guest, Joshua Leifer, and to producer Adi Shacham and editor Eli Shimoni. If you like the podcast and want to keep listening, don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're so inclined, leave us a comment and a 5-star rating. And to keep up with all of the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, don't forget to subscribe to and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.